Hi, everybody. Good evening. My name is Zinat Rahman. I'm the Executive Director of the Institute of Politics. Welcome. Thank you for the applause. We're so pleased to welcome you to a discussion today regarding environmental policy issues and global action addressing the crisis of climate change. Before one of our students formally introduces our guests in a few minutes, I'd like to mention a couple of upcoming events that we have at IOP and go over some housekeeping notes. So we're ending the quarter strong. We are not slowing down. On Tuesday, November 9th, IOP founding director David Axelrod will be in conversation with the new University of Chicago president, Paul Alvasaros. On Wednesday, November 10th, current IOP Pritzker Fellow Tony Fabrizio, who was former President Trump's pollster, and John Anzalone, who was President Biden's pollster, will unpack the election results in Virginia, New Jersey, and elsewhere, and look ahead to the 2022 midterms. On Thursday, November 11th, Eric Garcia, who's a journalist and author of We're Not Broken, Changing the Autism Conversation, and former IOP Pritzker Fellow Tim Alberta, who's a staff writer for The Atlantic, will be joining us to discuss the research and misperceptions surrounding autism and other disabilities. They will also discuss creative writing and their careers in journalism. For audience questions tonight, after the moderated discussion, we'll open up the floor to take questions from all of you in the audience. Please line up to ask your questions, and remember, everybody's welcome at the microphone. Please keep your mask on when you ask your question, and as usual, we'll give priority to the students for the first questions being asked. Please also make sure your phones are on silent. And we are now going to hear formal introductions of our speakers from Indy Kara, who's a fourth-year student in the college who's studying biology and creative writing. Indy is the outreach director for UChicago's Women in Science and the co-founder of the Scatterbrain podcast. Please join me in welcoming Indy to the podium.
Hello. Governor Jay Inslee was elected as the governor of Washington in 2012 after 14 years of serving in Congress. He is currently the longest-serving governor in the United States. Amongst many other things, Governor Inslee has made climate change a priority in the state of Washington and nationwide. He co-founded and co-chaired the United States Climate Alliance, a 21-governor alliance working to uphold U.S. goals under the Paris Agreement on climate change. Back home, Governor Inslee has focused in on clean energy legislation, working to make Washington dependent on 100% clean electricity by 2045 and expanding its clean energy sector by investing more than $76 million in clean energy. He comes to us on his way to COP26, the United Nations Climate Change Summit happening right now in Glasgow. Working alongside climate championing legislators are intrepid climate journalists who work every day to present us with accurate, empathetic, and accessible reporting on our changing planet. Our moderator, Amy Harder, is one such journalist. Amy is a longtime energy and climate reporter who recently joined Breakthrough Energy, a clean energy network founded by Bill Gates to launch a new climate and energy publication called Cypher. Amy has previously worked for Axios News, The Wall Street Journal, and The National Journal. Our conversation here tonight is foregrounded by factors that are impossible to ignore. The average temperature on our planet has risen 1.18 degrees Celsius since the late 19th century. The rate of global sea level rise has doubled in the last 20 years. We have witnessed extreme weather events across the world. Hurricane Ida brought massive amounts of rainfall to swaths of the United States. Fires swept through the American West in a period of unprecedented drought, with Lake Mead reaching its record lowest water levels this summer. These signals are not just indicators of a changing climate, but point to the people who will be most impacted by these disasters, the glaring inequities which have been made bare and exacerbated by climate change. I am eager to hear what these two leaders in climate and energy have to share with us tonight about the steps we need to take now to save our planet and its people. It is my absolute honor to introduce both Amy Harder and Governor Jay Inslee.
Well, thank you, Indy, for that great introduction. It is wonderful to be here. This is my first in-person on-stage event since the pandemic started. And it's wonderful to see people in person in a slightly changed way from before, but it's still wonderful to be able to see newsmakers and other people in person. And it's a particular pleasure to be here with you, Governor. I'm a Washingtonian, and so it's been great to have your leadership during the pandemic in particular. When I decided to move back to Seattle after living in DC for 12 years, Seattle, of course, was the beginning of the outbreak, and everybody told me, are you sure you want to move to Seattle? Ultimately, Seattle ended up faring the pandemic much better than other parts of the world, so I'm very grateful for that. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. Just to reiterate, we'll be taking questions both here and for those of you joining online. So those here in person, as was noted, you can go up to the podium and ask questions. For those joining us online on YouTube, you can ask a question in the comment section, and people will be monitoring that and then asking it on your behalf here in person. So please be thinking of questions you would like to ask. We also encourage everybody, whether in person or online, to be sharing on social media. You can use the hashtags Permanent Emergency and Climate Change IOP. So the governor and I will have a conversation for the first part and then get to the questions toward the end. So let's get to it. Governor, it's great to see you. We've been seeing all the headlines come out of the COP26 conference in Glasgow, so I just want to dive into that conversation, and you're heading there after this. What have you seen from this conference that gives you hope, and what are some things that are concerning to you?
You bet. Well, first off, thanks for having me here tonight. I am already inspired, and I am going to be the co-chair of the Indy for Governor of Illinois. Indy, thank you for your leadership. I appreciate it. And I say that I'm already inspired to see the number of people who've come out tonight to talk about climate change. Look, we know how tough this is. We know what a threat it is to our continued existence as a society and a species. And the fact that you're here tonight gives me hope. I've been in this battle for a quarter of a century. I got involved early as a member of the U.S. Congress, now as a governor. But to see you here tonight is inspirational. So I want to thank you for being here tonight. I want to thank David Axelrod for the invite. David is a hero of mine. At the moment that healthcare was in crisis, David Axelrod came to the U.S. House of Representatives, calmed the water, and got Barack Obama's healthcare plan through. Thanks, David Axelrod. He is an absolute hero. In answer to your question, what is going on in Glasgow? Some good things. The president's methane plan is most excellent, as they used to say in the movies. Most excellent. It's most excellent because it attacks this notorious chemical methane, which is 20 or 50 times worse short term than a molecule of carbon dioxide. It is extremely aggressive and appropriately so. And Joe Biden has shown real leadership on this, both on the methane and his proposals in the reconciliation bill. So I'm really happy about that, to have seen this. I saw that today there was 6 or 8 countries that made a commitment to get off coal entirely, including Poland, right? So Poland has been a big coal-fired, coal-producing company. And I just believe if Poland can get off coal, West Virginia can get off coal. That's what I believe. And I think that's a real game changer when you see economies that have been so dependent on coal understand that they have a future in a non-coal manner of speaking. So the people in Poland understand that they have a future economically beyond coal. So that's a significant event. And you see these, what you might consider, quote, small things happening, but that's the way you win battles against climate change. It's victory by 1,000 cuts against carbon. And so I'm pleased about some of the things happen. China is good news, bad news. I'm pleased that before the conference, China committed no longer to finance coal-fired plants and fossil fuel plants around the world. That's really, really helpful. But obviously, we know we have a lot of work to do to encourage, incentivize China to take the next step to join us on this effort. Now, the reason I'm going to Glasgow, and I hope this will be another success, I'm leading some of my colleagues in a group of states and provinces around the world that want to put our shoulders to the wheel. We don't want to just leave it to the federal governments. They're too slow. They're too amassed in bureaucracy. States, provinces, Illinois, Washington, Oregon, California, we can move the ball, and we are moving the ball. So we have a group of, the UN calls us subnationals, but we're supranationals because we can move faster than the federal government. I can do things in my state that will never get through the U.S. Congress, at least in the short term. So I think you're going to see some good news coming out of that meeting, and ours is on the 7th. So I'm looking forward to that.
What do you say to some of the criticism that's coming out of some of these announcements that they're more bark than bite? For example, Poland says it'll get off coal, but the date is actually in the 2040s, which is actually not any faster, I understand, than what they were going to say before.
Right.
So what's your response to that? Is this just more rhetoric?
Every single criticism of what is going to, every single criticism of the Glasgow process will be valid. Every single criticism. Because no matter how fast we're going to be able to go, we should be going faster. The science is that demanding. So to the youth of the world, I say have at it. We need to be more ambitious. We need to be more aggressive as to timelines, numbers, investment, everything. So I will tell you, no matter what it comes out of Glasgow, I will have wished it would have been more aggressive. But that doesn't mean that we're not committed to be as aggressive as humanly possible, and that's why I'm going on this trip, so that I can use the examples of other provinces, other governors around the world to say, look, if Illinois can do it, why can't the United States do it? And by the way, the United States can do it eventually. I'm leading a group of 25 states. It's the U.S. Climate Alliance, and we represent 61% of the whole U.S. economy. Our goals are way ahead of what's going to come out of Glasgow. But we're not even waiting for Glasgow. We're moving the ball ourselves. And I think that's one of the lessons I've learned in old age. Don't wait for somebody else. Just pick up the hammer and start hammering wherever you are. As a city council person or a county executive or a governor, don't wait for Glasgow. Do it ourselves in the communities where we live. And that's the message I'm taking there. And I think we're going to have some successes in this.
What announcements are you going to be making at Glasgow that you might want to share with us?
Well,
sneak peek.
Sneak peek. So on the 7th, we will be issuing, I don't want to give you too much, but we will be announcing a group of dozens of states and provinces around the world, groups on every continent, that will commit to some goals that are exceeding those that are probably going to come out of Glasgow. More aggressive on the percentages of improvement, more aggressive on the timeline, more aggressive on the regulatory and investment position. So we want to encourage the federal governments to move as fast as we can. But again, even if they cannot, we can carry the ball. And that's what we intend on doing. Now, we want to encourage other governors around the world as well. And so it's really exciting. We're going to have, you know, I look at Governor Wu, who's been so successful in South Korea, doing great things. He's sending a representative. We got South Africa coming. This is going to be fun to create some good news there.
Let's look to Washington, not our Washington, but Washington, D.C. It appears that Congress might be on the cusp of passing what would be the biggest climate change spending bill in history. What's your reaction to that? You've already made one sort of veiled comment about Senator Manchin.
Oh, that wasn't me.
Oh. Was it your friend next to you? Can you talk about what you're seeing there and how you think compromise could be had with Senator Manchin and Senator Sinema from Arizona?
Well, we are very hopeful that there will be an agreement, and there is some good news coming out on the climate front, because at least the vibrations I'm hearing is that there is pretty good consensus around an investment in excess of $500 billion. And this is the largest investment certainly we have made, several-fold what we have done, and that would be a fantastic result. Not everything that we would have wanted, because even a better tool would have been the clean electrical standard, which would have been what we're doing in Washington State. We have a clean electrical standard already in our state of carbon neutrality by 2030 and zero carbon by 2045. So we essentially would have made that a federal policy. Well, that didn't meet, West Virginia's viewpoint, so we went to Plan B, which is to use this investment technique to provide Americans the wherewithal to buy solar panels, to put in more efficient industrial supply systems, to put in more efficient transmission systems, the whole kit and caboodle. That's fantastic. It is a tool, and $500 billion is a huge investment. So I'm very happy about the number. Now, we haven't seen all the details about the investment system, and I'd like to see those before we get total verdict. But I have to tell you, I'm very happy about that we've been able to get that position, assuming it actually happens. And we are hopeful that Senator Manchin can see fit to recognize the future of West Virginia economically to advance through this. And I believe, seeing what's happened in my state, that every state in the union can profit by this transition. Look, this clean energy revolution is something that I think is America's greatest economic potential of any other transition since the transition from horse to steam and from analog, to our digital system. This is in our wheelhouse because we are the most innovative people in world history, and every state has a possibility of creating these new industries. There is no reason massive battery manufacturing plants that Ford is going to create. They're making an all-electric F-150, as you know. They're making multi-billion-dollar investments in 4 giant factories. There's no reason one of those can't be in West Virginia, or 2 of them. There's no reason that the advanced, nuclear that Bill Gates is doing exploration in could not take place in West Virginia. So I think every state can see this as an economic benefit, and I hope Senator Manchin will see that future for his people that he feels very, very proud of in his state.
So as you mentioned, Congress is relying on billions and billions of dollars of subsidies. The carrot side of the carrots and the stick debate when it comes to policies, Washington State has relied on both sticks and carrots. Do you think carrots only is an effective approach to combat climate change? Are there enough carrots to tackle climate change?
What I know about carrots is some carrots is better than no carrots. That's what I can say from a scientific and mathematical certainty. And 500 billion carrots lined up end to end probably go around Lake Michigan several times. So this is a huge investment.
Maybe some activist group can do that to see what it looks like.
It is several times larger than any scale that we've had before. The modeling that has been done, and models can be argued till the cows come home. But there has been some modeling that the administration has done that if you pick the number 50 as to what the original bill would have achieved, maybe you get 40 or 45 out of this investment. That's a long ways down the road. And so I am very pleased about that number. If we're going to use carrots, it's a very, very healthy investment. And some of my friends were active advancing. There's a group called Evergreen Action, which is an advocacy group that has been very active working with the administration and Congress to bring home that number. So I'm very pleased about that success.
So federal and global policy get all the attention, but the fact of the matter is, as you've noted, it's been the states here in the U.S. that have really actually passed concrete action. Now, Washington State has had an up and down experience with climate policy. A few ballot initiatives to price carbon have failed in the past, but you've had some breakthroughs since 2019. Can you talk about these successes, but also importantly, what made these successes possible after earlier failures?
Well, we have had, let me start with the successes and we'll work down. How's that? So successes is, what I can say is that our state arguably has the best state policies in the United States around climate, both because of our ambition and our aggressivity, but also because we've embedded environmental justice in everything that we do. So everything we do, we look at from an equity lens to make sure that overburdened communities are not experiencing the pollution. People in poverty, BIPOC communities who have historically had to breathe this pollution. We have looked at it through that lens. And I think this is a template for the whole country. And I'll tell you, I'll give you one story about why I feel strongly about this. I met a 14-year-old Latinx young woman about 8 or 9 years ago. She lived in the industrial area in South Seattle, and she lived right next to a freeway. And she says that she thought every child had asthma until she was 11, because all her friends had asthma. Why? Because they're breathing all this diesel smoke next to the freeway and the toxic material coming out from the industrial area. And she did her own sort of demographic research and found every quarter mile you live closer to the freeway or an industrial plant, your rates of asthma go up dramatically. And that since has been confirmed by the UW demographers. Well, who's breathing the smoke? It's people who are in the lower end of the income scale. It's people in the BIPOC communities. And so one of the things we've embraced in our policies is to drive investment to make sure that while we're lowering carbon emissions and reducing pollution, we don't end up just shoving it in one community that historically has had to breathe this pollution. So it's one of the things I think is proudest. So just ticking off some of our successes. One, we have a commitment on our electrical grid to go to 100% clean by 2045 and to be carbon neutral by 2030. We have a statewide...
But if I can just interrupt there,
yes.
It's relatively easy for Washington to go to 100% when so much of our electricity is already clean.
It is easier, but we have an aggressive goal. So we have been appropriately aggressive even with our hydroelectric. We have a statewide statute that requires the state to reduce its overall emissions by 45% below 1990 levels by 2030 and 95% by 2050. We have an electrical grid law that I had mentioned that requires all of our electrical grid to be zero carbon. And we just passed this last session, the best cap and invest bill in the country that sets an overall goal that has to meet those statutory targets and generates billions of dollars to recirculate back to help people get access to solar panels, electric cars, energy efficiency, subsidized public transit, the whole 9 yards. We've also passed just this last session a clean fuel standard, which will give consumers cleaner fuels over time as well. So those are some of the successes we had. But we still have road bumps. The legislature, in order to bring those last two things I talked about to life, I had to veto a poison pill that the legislators put in that would have prevented them from actually going into effect unless there were a 5-cent gas tax, which is actually nutty. So I had to veto them in order to bring these laws into effect. So you ask what we need to make things happen. Sometimes you need a governor who's committed. And some people think he should be committed, by the way, in another sense. But in any event, we've been very happy. But as you have indicated, this has been a bumpy road. We've lost 2 initiatives that brought some climate initiatives or climate policies to life, but we were undeterred. And I think one of the great lessons is here, we just have to persevere. There's no other option here about perseverance. And no matter how you might be disappointed in Glasgow at some point, some people may be, that you just can't stop. Too much is at stake. And eventually we'll win. And that's what we're showing in Washington State.
So it's my understanding in my reporting on Washington, although I'm based in Washington State, Washington is relevant for national reasons, which has been my focus, that 2 key reasons why Washington succeeded after failing was one you've already mentioned, which is bringing in environmental justice front and center, which brought on some important advocacy groups and groups that are supporting these communities, and so that was really important as well. The other one I understand is that oil companies came to the table. BP, which has a refinery in Washington State, finally supported the Cap and Invest program. And of course, oil companies have a very fraught role in our society. Their products have certainly caused climate change to begin with. They're trying to be part of the solution now. What do you think about this, Governor?
Well, and listen, anybody that will support policies I want, regardless of past sins, welcome to the table. If you'll help, we'll deal with the devil if you'll help pass whatever a good policy is. In this case, BP did play a positive role in this to help in that regard. But a much more important thing is we won some seats in the legislature. That's why we were able to do this good work. This all comes back to who's sitting in these seats. And if you want to know what you can do about climate change, anybody in this room, it's find a state legislator in a race next fall and go stuff envelopes to the extent we still have envelopes and go knock on doors for them and get them elected. That's what made the difference in our state. We won 3 or 4 or 5 races. We had some new legislators. That gave us the vote we needed. That's how you beat climate change. One door at a time, one text at a time, one TikTok at a time. And I hope all of you who are committed to this will think about that, because we need you. We need young people to vote. This is the most important thing in climate change, is to get the next leadership cadre of your generation to vote. That's what we need. And if you will help us do that, good things are going to happen on climate.
Well, since this is the Institute of Politics that we're speaking at, I do want to ask you about politics. So on the one hand, the polls show people are increasingly concerned about climate change, and states like Washington are able to pass aggressive climate policy. On the other hand, some people say that although people are more concerned about climate change, the country as a whole still doesn't support really aggressive climate policies. You have some members in the House who are on the more moderate side of the spectrum, pointing to some tight election race. Even this last week, we had some examples shown that actually the electorate isn't on board with a really progressive agenda. How would you say, between your time dating back to the House, which is where I think you and I first met, walking around the other Washington, to where you are today, how have you seen this issue progress? And what do you say to the people who say, yes, Americans are concerned about climate change, but no, we don't want to pay a ton more or enact these aggressive policies in order to address it?
Well, what I would say is people repeatedly fail to use climate change in an offensive manner in elections in the United States. And the reason they do that is too often they listen to their pollsters to say, well, we did a poll, Charlie, and it turns out climate was only the 6th thing that the people mentioned. And so they think, well, let's just not talk about it. That is a huge electoral mistake. And the reason is you win elections by contrast. That's how you win elections. You create a contrast with your opponent. And there is no other greater contrast of any issue where we represent the majority of Americans than climate change. Because unfortunately, at the moment, the Republican Party is still bought and paid for by the fossil fuel industry. They have refused to play a positive role. Not a single one of them has supported a meaningful climate change policy in the U.S. Congress. It is very sad. I can't wait till that changes. But until then, we just need to make sure that they're, retired to other duty and don't take seats where people can do good things. And so I got elected, and I have won at least 2 elections now, by contrasting myself with my opponent on issues of the environment. One little small story. I won an upset in 1998. I ran for the U.S. Congress against a sitting Republican, and he tried to paint himself as an environmentalist. So he ran this beautiful commercial. Our state is gorgeous. I hope you all come visit. And he had this aerial viewpoint of going over the Olympic Mountains and Puget Sound and the Columbia River, and it was gorgeous. And he said, if you live in this beautiful state, you have to be an environmentalist. And it was a gorgeous ad. But what I did is I took his ad and I ran the first 12 seconds of his ad where he says, if you live in Washington State, you just have to be an environmentalist. And then I froze his ad, and then I said, hold it right there, Rick White. In fact, you've been named one of the dirty dozen congressmen in the United States Congress on environmental issues. I beat him. In 2012, I ran on this issue on climate change and made this a specific reason why I was asking people to trust me, and spent millions of dollars on that message, and was elected again in an upset. I started 16 points behind. So I think politicians of my party, frankly, fail to recognize the salience of this to create that contrast. It's much harder to create that contrast of more general issues, but this is a stark difference, black and white.
Although Republicans are slowly coming around to acknowledging climate change, but also just this week, I believe, a trio of Republican senators actually put forward a plan that would, they say, reduce global emissions by 40%. Now, I think the details are not yet publicly available, but what do you say to the fact that there does seem to be this quite subtle shift where Republicans are trying to be supportive of climate policies, and this effort this week is actually the first time Republicans have ever put forth an actual target to reduce emissions. Do you think that's good? Do you think that's a sign that the Republican Party needs to come around because we need bipartisanship to effectively address climate change, or is it that we need all Democrats?
So what I would say is we are always welcoming any sincere effort from any party on this. So those are welcome developments. However, you have to recognize reality. Those 3 senators, and I haven't seen this proposal, but I don't even know what their proposal is, but I can tell you something about it. It'll never see the light of day. Mitch McConnell will bury it, kill it, cremate it, and that will be the end of that. So in the current situation, Republican Party, those good ideas will be stifled, number one. And number two, the Republican Party, I'm going to sound a little judgmental here. I'm hardly ever partisan, but I'll sound a little judgmental. The Republican Party has shifted, or many of them have said, from denying climate science to saying, yes, there is climate change. One would think that would be a better position morally for them. I actually argue it's worse, because the next sentence is, but we really shouldn't do anything about it. I would argue it's worse morally to recognize the problem and then refuse to do something about it than just denying that the house is on fire at all. It's worse to say, I know the house is on fire, but I won't lift a bucket to do anything about it. So I have to say that at the moment, there's only one party offering a real solution to this right now, unfortunately.
But to turn the microscope onto the Democratic Party, you talked about a coal state lawmaker holding things up in the Republican Party. The very same thing could be said for the Democratic Party. And of course, speaking of Senator Manchin, and I'm sure you've spoken to him many, many times over the years, I have as well, and he says he's representing the interests of the coal and increasingly natural gas constituencies in his state. How does a political system overcome challenges like that? Is it to get rid of the filibuster, to go down the wonky legislative parliamentary route, or is it to really try to meet these lawmakers where they're at and try to make sure that there is a reasonable transition for these energy sources and the people who work in them?
So I believe it is likely this evening to say it is likely that a major, huge, significant investment in climate change is going to be realized by the Democratic Party this year, and that Senator Manchin will end up supporting an enormous step forward with this investment. And when that happens, we should all sing Hosanna. And I'm hopeful that we will get to that point. I believe we will. I think he has evinced a need and a recognition to do that. Unlike any Republican, none of the Republicans lifted a finger to help on this investment. Not $1, if you will. So I think it will be a positive result with Senator Manchin at the end of the day. But look, this is a democracy, and everybody gets a vote, and that vote needs to be respected, and people need to compromise on these things. That is the nature of a democracy. And if we get 45 out of 50, that's a good day work. So I feel positive. Good things are going to happen this year.
One of the most difficult things about climate change is that time is not on our side here. Although it's a crisis that unfolds over decades and centuries, we need to be developing technologies yesterday to make sure that they're ready in time. But as we've been talking about, our political system and economic system, the billion-dollar infrastructure, pieces of infrastructure that are in place all over the country and world, are going to be around for a long time. So given the political situation we have with the democracy, which of course we all want to keep, and the slow-moving changes in our economic system, how can we make that work for a challenge where we need to be sprinting until we're done, until it's our time to leave Earth?
You do everything you can, every way you can, everywhere you can. And I do think that the nature of your question, those of us who are climate warriors, cannot be dissuaded or get our chins down recognizing the challenge that you've just posed. Yes, it's accurate. But the point is we cannot despair on this. There is no other option than success. And we have to realize that anything worth doing in human history involving significant social change takes longer than you would like, is harder than you would like, has more setbacks than you would like, and it's more frustrating than you would like. And that's certainly true. It was true for civil rights. It was true with every social progress that we made in the United States. So this is a big change, and we should expect setbacks and difficulties, and they cannot be dissuaded. And the way I look at it is, Trudy, my wife Trudy's here tonight. She bought me a coin dish, and it has a saying from Winston Churchill. He was in London when the bombs were all falling down in 1940, and somebody came up to him and, said, "How are you so upbeat in these horrendous days?" And he said, "These are great days. Even with all the smoke and disaster," he said, "these are great days." And they asked him why, and he said, "Because these are days of consequence. These are days where you can make a difference. These are days where you can overcome obstacles and bring that courage that you eventually can summon." And I think that applies right now to everybody in this room. These are great days to be alive, because nobody has ever been alive in human history that has such consequential things we could do for the planet Earth and for humankind, literally. Think about that. This is, in some weird way, a gift that you and I can make a difference here that will be as consequential as anything that's ever happened in human history. So I'm not dissuaded. We just can't be dissuaded from these things.
So then what do you make of all the headlines and comments that have come out of Glasgow saying this is, I think, Senator Kerry, the special envoy for climate change under President Biden, has said this is our last best chance. I mean, what are we going to do? Just take a vacation for the rest of our lives if Glasgow fails?
No, here's my central point. The nation states are not the only game in town. Thinking about climate change would be like thinking and think only about the national governments, would be thinking about football and only thinking about, the NFL and not the AFL, or the American League instead of the National League. Our smaller electoral units can be just as effective as larger units. It's a different scale, but the pace can even be faster. So I am not going to be dissuaded from the action we're taking for our state, and I suspect J.B. Pritzker is going to feel the same I do. I'm going to meet him the day after tomorrow. We're going to move the ball no matter what happens in Glasgow, and that should give us some dose of optimism about this. Now, there's another thing, too, I want to say. The pace of technological change is so stunning right now that it's hard to be totally pessimistic. I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. In the last 2 months, let me just share with you some of the places I've been in my state. I've been in Maltby, Washington, where a company is making a battery, a silicon-based anode for a battery that may be able to increase battery capacity by 50%. So a battery in your car will have 50% more mileage over time. It's now being prototyped in every major auto manufacturer. I've gone to the company that's making the first all-electric buses in Ferndale, Washington. I went to Arlington, Washington a few weeks ago, and I saw the final completion of the first all-electric commercial airplane in human history. It's a 9-seater. They've already got 12 orders to do DHL freight. It's going to fly hopefully in November. Last week, I went to a company that's making a fuel cell lithium propulsion system. They're putting it into a truck. They're taking out the diesel and putting in a fuel cell with absolutely clean hydrogen in the largest truck in the world. It's 45 feet tall. It mines precious metals for our cell phones. This is just one little state. This is the type of technological innovation that is going on. This is independent of any regulatory system or carbon pricing system. You cannot imagine how fast this is going. I wrote a book, co-wrote a book 10 years ago about this, and I basically had a vision statement that this is going to happen, that solar would come down dramatically, wind power price would come down dramatically, electric cars would be commonplace. Turns out I was wrong. All of this has happened about twice as fast as I sort of predicted in 2007. So this is a cause for optimism, I think, sometimes that people forget.
Well, next time you go on one of these trips, Governor, you can invite me and I'll do a story about it. Does that sound good?
We'll be there.
Great. Just as a reminder, we'll be going to questions in a few minutes, so be thinking of what you'd like to ask. And for those joining online on YouTube, you can add a question into the comment section, and somebody here will ask it on your behalf. And just again, as a reminder, we'll want to leave the first few questions for students specifically. So we've talked about, Governor, here, how urgent and how climate change is really the biggest environmental challenge of our time. So given that, how should politicians weigh competing environmental priorities when it comes to building new carbon-free energy infrastructure like wind and solar farms, power lines, and also preserving existing carbon-free sources?
I think this is a really hard question. And, we're facing it in my state. So if you're going to cite some business that creates clean energy, everything has some environmental impact, right? Every building you build has some environmental impact. And so we have to recognize that if we are going to decarbonize our economy, we are going to replace all of this infrastructure. It's going to involve building by necessity. And that building, all of it, is going to have some degree of some environmental impact. So these can become difficult questions. And the best answer I have is do good science, be honest with yourself about the environmental consequences, and if there are negative environmental consequences, always think about an alternative. Is there an alternative site for the solar plant that doesn't, affect the sage grouse or the pygmy rabbits? And these are issues we have in my state. So do good science, be honest with yourself, and always look for alternatives if you can, and do that early in the process. So, but I don't want to say that there won't be some hard decisions in this regard.
You're also dealing with it in another way, I understand, Governor, regarding salmon and dams in Washington. So Washington State gets the majority of its electricity from hydropower, which is why we have such a clean state, but there's this growing call to remove some dams to preserve the salmon population. Mm-hmm. And I understand you have launched a task force to determine whether or not these dams should be removed, and could the benefits of these dams be maintained in another way in order to remove them. So, I guess to be devil's advocate, talking about the sense of urgency here, given the urgency here, shouldn't every ounce of clean energy be preserved as much as we can so we can make the progress we need to make? Wouldn't that be an argument to keep the dams operating?
It is an argument, but what we intend, Senator Murray and I are forming a task force to determine, can you replace those services adequately with less environmental consequence? There's transportation, there's electricity, there's irrigation. Can you replace those things in a way with less negative environmental consequences? If we can, we certainly should consider doing so. So we're launching a study, hope to have it next summer, to evaluate that particular issue, and we're going to do an honest assessment of that question. So you do point out one of the issues that is not a slam dunk issue, but we intend to do good science, good economic assessment about how to replace those systems.
So this is an issue that's affecting the entire world. It's going to be my next column in Cypher. I hope everybody can sign up and read that. It's happening in Australia, in Europe, all across the US. The New York Times just had a big story about the opposition facing solar farms. What have you learned so far with the solar and wind farms in Washington, and also this issue about the dams? How can society move forward quickly and fast while not bulldozing over people who are concerned about these other environmental impacts while addressing climate change?
We have had great success in building this infrastructure. An example, several years ago, I and some friends thought we should try to pass an initiative to create a renewable portfolio standard, to say you have to get a certain percentage of electricity from clean renewable fuels. People thought we were nuts when we did that, but we passed it narrowly. We had essentially no wind power of any meaningful dimension in our state, and now we have a $7 billion industry. And these have been widely accepted. We have had very few siting issues that prevented meaningful construction. Solar is also, large concentrated solar is coming into Eastern Washington in significant degree. And we have been able to figure out these siting problems. Again, because we followed these principles. Do good science, be honest about it, and if there is a problem, look for an alternative site. So far, we have been able to surmount those problems because we have been good listeners to the community. When you do a program like this, you want to make sure the community can all come in, express their concerns, see if there's a way around them. Don't ignore them, engage them. And these principles have worked so far for us. So far, siting has not been the problem.
I want to ask one more question before we hand it over to the audience, which kind of going back to the global picture and the political picture, we've seen energy prices rise rapidly here in the United States and elsewhere, particularly in Europe. There's been shortages of coal in India and China. Natural gas prices are going through the roof in Europe. Natural gas prices here are going to be a lot higher in the United States. Now, there's this big debate about what that means for the clean energy transition. Let's put aside, climate change is not causing this energy spike. It's caused by the pandemic and all of that. But from a political perspective, Governor, how does somebody like you explain to an average voter who, if they can't afford their heating bill, how are they going to have the wherewithal to worry about climate change when there's an immediate crisis on their doorstep?
We want inexpensive, clean energy for Americans. And I can guarantee you, if you want inexpensive, clean energy you can depend on at a stable price, using only fossil fuels is probably the most ridiculous plan you can possibly have. There is no reason we should have a vision where we intend to be addicted to Saudi Arabian oil for the next 100 years and a victim of whatever price gouging system the industry can expose us to. We want to get off that expensive energy and on less expensive energy. And that is what we're doing right now, because solar energy today is less expensive than coal energy. Wind power is less expensive in many instances than coal energy. And this is something that is there for several million years. Oil and coal, to some degree, are finite resources. For several million years, the sun is not. And it's a stable source that is not subject to the whims of OPEC or some foreign nation that can tamp down the spigot anytime they want to increase the price. They just tamp down the spigot a little bit, and you got to pay an extra buck a gallon for gasoline. We got to get off that addiction and give Americans less expensive energy. But that's what we have to do. And so I'm proud to position this not just as a way to save the planet, but to save your pocketbook long term, so we're not victims of price gouging.
What do you make of President Biden calling on OPEC to increase production? And also just today, I think they're moving ahead on leasing oil on public lands. Is that something you support?
I haven't looked at his proposals. I really can't comment on what specifically he's done. There might be some short-term things you're doing in the short term, but he understands, and by the way, I've been very delighted by President Biden's leadership on this. I think he's done a super job. He's been ambitious, he's been effective to date, he's doing everything he can in the U.S. Congress. So I love what he's doing. If he has to do some short-term things to get through us a rough patch because of the fossil fuel stranglehold, but he understands we want to break that stranglehold eventually, get their hands off our throats. And the way to do that is to promote clean energy, and that's what we're doing.
Well, I would love to move to questions from the audience now. So please come down to the mic if you'd like to ask a question. And we reserve the first few questions to students. And just as a reminder, please keep your questions relatively brief and also in the form of a question.
Hi, I'm Anisha. I'm a master's degree student here studying business and public policy. So I'm from California, and our state has literally been on fire for the past several years. And you talked about the immediacy of the issue. Given that, and given many of the people in Congress really won't be alive to deal with the long-term effects of climate change, do you think it's more realistic to turn to the private sector for short-term change? Because it just doesn't seem like the public sector is capable right now.
Yeah, if you heard the question was, shouldn't we really depend on private sector as well, or in replacement of the public sector? Look, this is not either or, it's both. We did, the private sector is an enormous player in this today and should remain a player in this because they're bringing the investment. I mentioned those 4 companies that are in my state. Look, that's all private investment. These are profit-driven companies that want to make a buck and are doing so. And we need them to do that. We need to support them and do that. Now, one of the ways to do that is to have a regulatory scheme that doesn't allow the fossil fuel industry to put their pollution in the atmosphere for free. Right now, that electric bus company that has clean buses is competing with companies that might make dirty buses, and they get to put their pollution in the air for free. So here's a place where governments can help private sector and not allow that unfair situation to exist. Look, we can't take our garbage and when we take it to the garbage dump, it costs us $50 a picket or whatever it is now to dump it. But these companies are putting their pollution in the air for free. We need to fix that. It's an externality. I'm sure that you've learned about that here. And that's how government can help private sector. But I don't think it's either or. It's both.
Hi, Governor. My name's Ibrahim Rashid. I'm a student here at the Harris School getting my master's in public policy. I'd love to just get your perspective on the kind of like the political decision-making that went into formulating and then passing through this cap and trade, cap and invest program. I understand that Washington had 2 failed ballot initiatives on a carbon tax. One was on revenue neutral, the other one was about like having revenue go to environmental justice. And as you know, one of them had like the Petroleum Association supporting it, then they pulled out. So thinking about that experience of like the failed ballot initiatives, was the idea, like where did the idea of a cap and trade program come from? Was it sort of to try to get like the Petroleum Association involved, to get Republicans and moderates involved? We'd just love to understand like the political dynamics of the cap and trade after the 2 failed ballot initiatives. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. By the way, this is a great university that you know all this stuff. I mean, this is quite a great university. Congratulations.
I'm taking a whole class on cap and trade, and I wrote all about I wrote all about Washington actually.
Well, I should read your paper. I'll probably learn something. So send me your paper. I'd love to see it.
I will.
So, you know, basically, we know what we need. We need a system to simultaneously not allow this externality to continue ad infinitum. It gives an advantage to polluting industries and disadvantages clean industry. We needed to have a fair playing field, number one. And number two, we wanted to create a revenue source to help Washingtonians get access to electric cars and solar panels and everything else. So the cap and invest system is one of the ways to do it. And it had the advantage of we had the votes to get it done. Now, you can argue, and I'm sure you've heard arguments of other systems that could be better, more efficient, more, you know, this, that, and the other. This had the advantage of we could get it done, and we had the votes to get it done. Now, as I said, we didn't really get done without my veto, right? So they put a poison pill on it. I vetoed the poison pill, so we had to get that done too. So this was not an easy walk in the park. So maybe I ought to get your paper and show it to the legislators, and they'll vote with me next time.
Thank you, Governor.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Georgia. I'm a first year at the college, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for coming to speak with us. I had a question about the Clean Cars 2030 bill. For those who don't know, this bill would have set the goal that all new cars sold in the state of Washington after 2030 would be electric. It had public support and passed the legislature, but you vetoed it, saying that you did so because it was attached to a specific road usage charge. Given that you supported a 2030 gas car phase out for the whole country when you ran for president in 2019, my question is, so if you support this bill's goal, why not implement an executive order or something like that saying the same thing? Why drop the issue entirely?
Yeah, well, basically that law was not necessary because we're doing it a different way. So we already are going to have a law that we will not have internal combustion engines after 2035. And that'll take place as soon as the Biden administration allows the California ZEV rule, zero emission vehicles, to go in place. We will come automatically under that as well. So we already have a provision to do it. The bill was not necessary. There were some technical glitches I won't go into about that made this a problem technically. But I can tell you we're going to have essentially the same policy as soon as the Biden administration passes that waiver. And I feel very powerfully about this. Because look, people who drive electric cars never go back. You drive electric, nobody's ever bought an electric car and gone back to internal combustion engine. They're safe, they're clean, they got more torque, They're the fastest cars in the, essentially, the motorcycle that holds the drag race quarter-mile record is an electric motorcycle, right? So I feel very powerfully that this is the right policy, and thanks for your question.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hello, Governor. Thank you for being here tonight. My name is Juan Pablo Ocampo. I'm a second-year student here at Harris. And I wanted to know that considering the damages that are constantly actively done to indigenous communities in the US and Canada, I'm thinking about oil pipelines, dams, and other infrastructure that might not seem in their tags as an attack on climate or that has climate consequences and impacts, but that the indigenous communities are very aware and familiar of it, right. And they are very aware of how to think on the long term. I was wondering if you think that your state requires the legislation update to ensure that the tribe's rights priorities are respected.
Yes, this is an important issue. We pride ourselves in our relationship, the sovereign-to-sovereign relationship with our tribal community. And we are intending to have a new protocol about the consultation when we have siting of these we talked about siting. When we do siting of these clean energy, we want to have consultation with the tribes to make sure there's not a concern that can't be alleviated with sacred sites, with archaeological values of the tribes. So as recently as 2 weeks ago, I had a meeting with all the tribes to talk about a new protocol about how to have that consultation. It is an important thing. I believe we're going to have a success in getting an agreed upon consultative process. But thanks for your question, because it's an important thing. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ethan Drong. I'm a first year in the college. And speaking of Glasgow and environmental justice, I'm curious about your opinion on the debate over fairness in decarbonization burdens. Specifically, there are some who argue that because the developed world got the chance to industrialize with fossil fuels, that nations in the global south should be afforded that privilege as well, or at the very least that the developed world should provide some sort of subsidies or reparations to those countries for polluting in the past. So what are your thoughts on that?
So yes, from a fairness standpoint, the developed world ought to have a disproportionate responsibility for this problem. I'm pleased that Biden has increased significantly what the U.S. is contributing to help the developing world in some of their transition. Is that 100% restorative? No, it's not. But it is a significant investment. And I think it's just limited in the amount of your country can accept politically, if you will. And I think he's stretched to get to that level. So I'm glad he's increased it. It is a significant recognition of that responsibility. It has not eliminated all unfairness in this century's differential, but it's a good step. I'm glad he's done it. And I think what he's doing is probably about as much as we can stretch right now with the current situation in the U.S. Congress.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Charlie. I'm a first-year student at the college here. And I want to say thank you so much for being here tonight. I think one really wonderful point that you made was about how advancing technology is allowing us to combat climate change faster than ever. But on the flip side of that, what we've seen exploding like this year especially is a technological development that is projected to be potentially very harmful to the climate. I'm talking about cryptocurrencies. And my question would be, what steps is the state of Washington looking at, on the local level, or if there is anything that can be done to mitigate the potential environmental damage caused by the energy consumption used to produce cryptocurrency?
Serious question. We have not had any sort of targeted thing on cryptocurrency, but they're under the same umbrella of reduction requirements as every other industry. So they don't get a pass on pollution. So the electricity they use will be ratcheted down over time. The carbon footprint of the electricity they use will be ratcheted down by necessity of this cap. And we have multiple caps. We have the cap on the electrical grid that I've talked about to be 100% clean. But we also have an economy-wide industrial cap that pertains to the whole economy as well. So they can't escape by just switching to natural gas or any other energy source. So there is a regulatory system in place that will reduce their emissions portfolio as well, or footprint as well. But we have not, and perhaps it involves that we should be thinking about, because the rate of growth is just unbelievable. Now, having said that, you know, there are some jobs being created by the industry in my district, because there's a whole bunch of server farms in Quincy, Washington, using the cheap electricity from our hydro system, which is clean, right? It's really low carbon footprint from the hydro system. So the good news, at least in my state, is this is not coal-based electricity. It's hydro-based, which is, you know, relatively low carbon footprint. So there's the good sign of it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hello, Governor Inslee. My name is Natalie. I am a second-year public policy major in the college, and I just wanted to ask, so you spent a lot of time speaking about how in Washington state in particular, you've been prioritizing sort of mitigating the effects of climate change on low-income communities and communities of color, and really putting that at the forefront of a lot of your policy. But I think on the flip side, it's kind of a commonly known fact that the top 10% of people wealth-wise worldwide contribute 50% like to carbon emissions or something around those lines. And so I'm wondering sort of what you're doing on the flip side to hold the wealthiest Americans or the wealthiest people in your state accountable for the effects that their actions have on climate change.
Well, when you think about it, and I haven't thought about it this much through this lens, but when you think about it, any regulatory cap that we impose does place a disproportionate burden on wealthier people, because they're the ones that are using the most carbon. So we are extracting from them and reducing carbon more per capita to a millionaire than someone at the lower end of the scale, because they're using more carbon, right? So whatever we do that will impact their usage, and it could be a price signal through the cap and invest, and it's fair to do that, right? Because they're using more carbon on a per capita basis. So I think we are doing that, but I don't think we've done it as progressively. You could argue we haven't done it as progressively as the income tax system, which not only does it dollar for dollar, but has an increased percentage. We're not going that far. And I haven't thought of a way to do that. But that's a very intriguing question. I think you should get extra credit.
Thank you.
And please tell your professor that I said so on that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for speaking.
Hi, thank you for being here, Governor. Savannah Doty, I'm a student at the college, and you talked a bit about the technological advancements that Washington is looking into, but I was curious about how Washington is managing issues that don't have quite a technological solution, like forest fires, for example, that are becoming increasingly prevalent in our state, as well as becoming more of like a fire season than just one-off situations.
Well, we are just sick about our forests because they are all subject to burning, increased burning. I'm just sick about it because I love the forest. I grew up in the forest, love to hike, and I'm very disturbed about it. So what we are doing is trying to increase the resilience of the forest to fire. There are many ways to do that, but one of which is to reduce the fuel loading in our forests. As you know, our forests, because of our management policies, have increased the fuel load per acre. And so they've been much more, they're getting hit by a double whammy. One is climate change, so you have hotter temperatures and more drought, but they're also being hit by our management policies, which has resulted in much thicker forest, a lot more fuel per acre. So fires that used to burn an acre now burn 100,000 acres. And so reducing that fuel load, thinning some of the underbrush, getting the stuff off the forest floor so you don't get canopy fires. We're very actively in doing that. The only problem with it, it's very expensive. It's very labor intensive. So we are putting millions of dollars into that effort. But I have to tell you that no matter what we do, we're still going to have horrendous fires because the pace within which we can do this management, it just takes a long time to do it. So it's going to be real tough next couple of decades in our forests, unfortunately. And I want to note, this is not just forests, it's breathing. When forests burn, we breathe it. Kids could not go outside in Seattle, Washington last summer for some period of time just because of the respiratory problem. The worst air in the entire world was in my state last summer for about a week in the Methow Valley. Literally, people could not go outside their homes. So this is a health issue as well, and that's one of the things I want to note before we leave. This is not just polar bears, it's just not trees. We love them both. It's about lungs. This is a health issue, and forest fires are a health issue. And we need to make sure people think of it in those terms.
Great, thank you.
Be safe.
We have about 10 minutes left and 3 questioners, so we'd love to get through all 3 of you.
Good evening, Governor. My name is Tony Liu. I'm a first year here at the college. And obviously there's going to be a lot of economic benefits to the transition to clean energy, new jobs, industries, and a lot of other places too. But with any big economic transition, there's always a lot of people who don't make it. People have to, some people aren't going to make the jump to new jobs. People are going to have to move homes, get re-educated, maybe be homeless or jobless for a while. And more importantly, a lot of people are going to have to fundamentally change their lives. So I guess my question to you is, from a policy standpoint, how do we prepare people to make the jump, and so we protect as many people as possible? And on a more human level, how do you have that conversation with people to tell them that their lives have to change so that the future of us all can be protected?
Well, the first thing I would say is the pace of change is not as rapid as you might think. Listen, unless you're a 25-year-old coal miner, your life isn't going to change that much because coal is not going to be zeroed out next week. This is a transition period of, a couple decades. So unless you're just starting your career, there's not that much change in your particular life. I think it's overstated about those individuals' concerns, and talking to them about that, I think, is an important thing, number one. But number two, if you do think your career is going to be effective, we need to do as much as we can to help people through that transition. And that is obviously retraining, obviously financial aid to go back to school, or a different apprenticeship. We're really big in our apprenticeships in our state. We have a program called Career Connected Learning. So if you want to be in one trade, you want to go to a different trade, you don't have to go to college, you go to an apprenticeship that we help put into place. And you have real life experience on the job and get a skill, a different skill in a different industry. So making that available. But that's not the only thing. We want you to have health care during the interim. We want you to have child care during the interim. That's why I'm real happy about the reconciliation bill. It's going to have the biggest increase in child care. We want your child to have early child education. We want you to have better medical care through Medicare. And so that whole suite of policies are helpful through this transition period. And by the way, thank you to the University of Chicago. You gave us Carl Sagan, who gave us billions and billions of stars. And you gave us Bernie Sanders with billions and billions of programs. So thank you very much. We're very happy about that. We're glad Bernie's doing some good work. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for being here, Governor. I'm Alex. I'm a second-year environmental science major at the college. You talked about the importance of localized policy change. And so on that note, here at the college, the University of Chicago has pledged to reduce emissions by 50% by 2030. And I was just wondering if that's the type of change that you're discussing on a localized level, or should local policy changes be much more expansive given the delay in wide-scale change?
Well, that's a great story, and thank you for your leadership on this. I would argue there is no single thing you can do to decarbonize your family, your life, your classroom, your business that isn't a really good thing to be proud of. And that achievement, if you can get to 50% reduction on this campus, in the afterlife, you will get as many stars as somebody signing a deal at Glasgow. That's how I feel about it. Maybe even more, because you're doing it right under your own control. So bless you, bless everybody who's doing this. Every single thing helps. And I hope you'll be proud of your achievement. Tell them it was my idea, though, will you? Sorry.
Hello, Governor. My name is Divya Mehrotra. I'm a first year at the college from California, so quite a bit of experience with the effects of climate change. But to kind of sum it up as one of the last questions, environmental science and climate change doesn't just concern bringing down emissions, but it's also about sustainability. And your state hosts one of the largest companies in the world, Amazon, that does have a significant contributor to an unsustainable way of packaging, unsustainable way of shipping, and unsustainable way of delivering. So how do you plan to combat Amazon, especially when they have such economic leverage over your state and jobs?
Well, Amazon will be subject to all of our laws just like everybody else. So they will be required to reduce emissions just like everybody else. They don't get some special deal here. And so we can give you that confidence. But I will tell you about Amazon. Everybody has a justification to be critical of every large enterprise because we all want them to go faster. They are doing some things that I think are going to be helpful. Number one, they are transitioning to electric delivery vehicles through the Rivian company. So the Rivian company, they've helped finance its development, I believe, and to go to all electric, jump all the way out of fossil fuels to go to all electric will be a huge development. They also are they're making huge investments in packaging to try to come up with more sustainable packaging. They know this is an enormous load on the environment. I do believe they're making substantial investments in this regard. But like everybody else, we can always ask them to go faster as we can, states and governments and universities, and we all should do that. By the way, they also are very helpful in the climate pledge arena. So I helped inaugurate the Climate Pledge Arena. It is the first net zero arena. It holds the Seattle Kraken and they do music events in Seattle. It's the first net zero arena in world history. And Amazon was very active on that. So there is some positive signs there, but we all got to spur them on. Thank you.
Well, I have to say, those were really incredible questions. You can have a future in journalism as well, if that's where your career takes you. I want to say thank you to everybody who has joined us here tonight, and for those joining online, and in particular, Governor, thank you so much for your time, and we wish you safe travels to Glasgow.
Thank you very much. Good luck. Should we get a selfie? We'll get a selfie here. Can you guys hold on just a second? Let's get a selfie here. So we cannot have a meeting without a selfie. Can we have a selfie with you? Yeah, what we'll do is I'll take a picture right here with everybody. If I can get my glasses to get my phone to work here. Somewhere my glasses are.
And then you have to tweet it, Governor.
Yeah, and then we'll put it out. Trudy, do you have your phone here? I can borrow your phone here for some reason. I don't know what I did with my glasses to get my phone.
The woman to the rescue.
Of course. I don't know who stole my glasses here. I don't know what I did with them. Can you help me with the phone?
They're in the chair. Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, here we go. Okay, everybody with your masks on, get a big smile. Let's see, we'll get it like that. Here we go. All right, there we go. All right, we're immortal. We'll send that to everybody. Good luck. Be well. Thank you.